Well, the people around Peter said, "You are definitely one of them because you're a Galilean. Your speech betrays you." And one man said, "Yes, I saw you in the garden with him tonight." Well, Peter began to curse and to swear, saying he didn't know Jesus. And the rooster crowed the second time. And Jesus turned round and he looked straight at Peter, and they both remembered what Jesus had said, that Peter would deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. So they both knew what had happened. And Peter went weeping bitterly away from there. Well, it was soon morning, and the priests and the elders, they discussed how to get Jesus put to death. As Jews, they had no legal power to do it, so they decided to tie him up and take him to the governor, the Roman governor named Pilate. Well, Judas, when he saw that Jesus actually had been condemned, he was afraid and he wished he had never betrayed Jesus. He took that money that seemed so important not very long ago, and now it seemed worthless. He did not want that money anymore, and he took it back to the chief priests and elders, and he said, "I have sinned. I betrayed innocent blood." And they said, "That's not our business. You go deal with that." Well, Judas threw the money on the floor, and he went out, and he hanged himself. Well, the chief priests were always careful to make sure that everything was done just right, so they looked good according to the law. And so they took that money and they said, "Well, we can't put it back in the treasury because it's not clean anymore. It was the price of blood. What will we do with it?" And they decided to buy a field to bury strangers in. And the field became known as the Field of Blood. And this too was a fulfillment of prophecy. So the whole multitude that had been at the high priest's palace now went to the place where the Roman governor Pilate was. And they took Jesus to him. Although they had convicted him as worthy of death because he said he would sit on God's right hand, they couldn't bring that to Pilate as his accusation, because what would a Roman care about their religion? That didn't mean anything to him. So instead, they accused Jesus of perverting the nation, forbidding to give tribute or taxes to Caesar, and saying that he was a king. They wanted to make it political so that the Romans would think that he was a bad man and they needed to get rid of him. They wanted Pilate to think that Jesus was would fight against the Romans and their government. So when Jesus came to Pilate, Pilate said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Because that's what the priest had told him. And Jesus said, "You say it, thou sayest it." When the chief priests and elders accused him, Jesus did not say a word. He just stood there silently. He didn't try to defend himself. He knew what was going to happen, regardless of what he said. And they were just giving false accusations, so there was no reason for Jesus to say anything. And Pilate said, "Don't you hear what they're saying about you?" But Jesus still did not speak. Pilate marveled greatly. He was really surprised at the way Jesus was acting, because usually if somebody was being accused, they would argue back, they would defend themselves, they would be afraid of what was going to happen. But Jesus just stood quietly. So Pilate said, "I find no fault with this man." Well, then the people that had brought Jesus, they protested more vehemently. They were even more impassioned. They said, "Well, he stirs up the people. He's getting the people all riled up. Maybe there'll be a rebellion. You better watch out. He's getting the people all stirred up. He's all the way to Galilee." And Pilate said, "Oh, is he a Galilean? Oh, he's from Herod's jurisdiction." So he thought he would get out of the whole situation by sending Jesus off to Herod and let Herod deal with it, because Herod was in charge of Galilee and Pilate was in charge of Jerusalem. Well, Herod just happened to be in Jerusalem, so they took Jesus to Herod that day. And Herod was actually glad to see Jesus because he had heard about him and he had heard about Jesus' miracles and he wanted to see one. But no matter what Herod said to Jesus, Jesus didn't answer him and he certainly didn't show him any miracles. Meanwhile, the priests and the scribes were all accusing him and bothering Herod. Well, Herod and his soldiers, they didn't get to see a miracle. He didn't say anything to them. So Herod and his soldiers mocked Jesus. They put a gorgeous robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Well, Pilate, the ball was back in his court. He had to figure out what to do. He said, "You have brought this man to me as one that perverts the people. You say he's stirring up the people. Well, I've examined him and I find no fault with him. And neither did Herod. Herod didn't find any fault with him either. Tell you what, it's a custom for the Roman government to release a prisoner on the Passover. Well, this is the Passover. So, would you rather I release Jesus or Barabbas?" Barabbas was a murderer that they had finally caught after chasing for a while. So he figured that they wouldn't want Barabbas. But to his surprise, the people cried out, "Give us Barabbas." And Pilate said, "Well then, what will I do with Jesus?" And they said, "Crucify him." That was what the Romans did to punish criminals. Nail them to a cross. Oh, I have pictures now. I had a whole section without pictures. Now I have some pictures. So I'm going to show those